Ladies and gentlemen, everyone around and in between, it is Debate Sensei, IPDA edition, where we talk about things relevant to the International Public Debate Association for competitive debate. I have with me Tim Seavey from the beautiful city of San Diego. Hello, Tim.
Scientific facts, greatest city in the history of humankind. And your chief banter officer. Jared, where are you coming from?
This is my office. I am, so this is
Trophy Dungeon.
Oh yeah. This is so we just had a speech and debate practice session, and so I did not have time to get home to the studio, and we're gonna be doing it here today.
Oh, these? Oh, yeah. I didn't even notice these.
So yeah, I do it for a little bit of a credibility boosting when I'm trying to recruit people. I'm also playing the role of the before picture for a hair conditioner ad. So
it's going to be incredible come a couple of weeks when you have absolutely no hair as well.
Yeah, that's right. So it might be right about when we're airing this that I might be shaving. So November 25th, every year I have a charity event where I shave my hair for children's cancer research, getting donations for that. You'll probably be seeing that on the social media feeds in a little bit.
Good stuff.
All right.
So today being IPDA, what are we doing?
We're doing our topic selection. So this is one of our favorite ones to do. The episode kind of takes care of itself. We actually collect topics from a recent tournament if we can. And we use one of the rounds to actually simulate a topic selection process, but we take 30 minutes to do it rather than 3 minutes. And we kind of explain our reasoning for doing that. And speaking of which, I better get the coin flip going because we do that in a little bit.
While you do that, quick thank you and shout out to the annual Griffin tournament held at Grossmont College. So thank you to Michael McCann and Roxanne Tuscany over at Grossmont College for providing these topics. I was honestly a very big fan of these topics. These were pretty good. So the topics today are coming from the second Elam round, from the final round of IPDA at this most recent Griffin Invitational.
All right. So what we do is that we actually flip a coin. So normally in a tournament, the sides are known before you start the topic selection. You walk into the topic announcement area knowing what side you're on, and then they present you with the topics. But in order to kind of as closely simulate this, we don't know what side we're on. We let the coin decide for us, and then from there, we do the topic selection. So I'm going to use this one here. All right. And so I always flip, and heads, Tim is affirmative. Tails, he is negative. Here we go. All right. There you go. Go.
So with that, you get the first strike.
First strike. Okay, here we go. I'm on the negative. Okay. All right. Well, let me get rid of some of your ammunition. There we go.
That's easy one to strike on the neg. Unfortunately, favorite topic for the affirmative, but
yeah, I don't think that it's necessarily a timeless topic. I think in this day and age, like the way that the wealth gap has been going, just the ridiculous accumulation of wealth in fewer and fewer hands. I think we have surpassed the wealth gap that we are experiencing in the Gilded Age, and it was even then that was troublesome, and so it becomes really difficult. I don't know, like the typical arguments, about job creators and things like that. I think kind of falls a little flat. It becomes like really old and dated arguments that don't seem to take into account sort of like the modern situation that we find ourselves.
Yeah, I think the pooling of wealth in things like investment or just glut of like it's just sitting in index funds and things, like it's not actually moving through an economy necessarily. Like it tends to just be used to purchase smaller business, like another business or another company, or hold a debt or like be, leveraged against other kinds of debt and things. Like it's not that the more like the greater accumulation of wealth means that more people have that. It's that like, or even like that it is being deployed by the few to, I don't know, move about the many or to fund the many. But in any case, if you were the negative on that, where are you going?
So the negative should adopt a wealth tax for billionaires. If I had to do a wealth tax for billionaires, I don't know. Like, I mean, I'm trying to think of counterplans, but all of the counterplans seem to be permeable, right? Like, and so, like, if I do something that's like, no, we should do millionaires and billionaires. It's like, well, that's just an easy permutation. If I try to go for a universal basic income thing, it's like, well, that's how we're going to pay for the universal basic income. So that's a permutation. I'm really having some troubles. We should adopt. So I would have to exclude certain billionaires from it in order to do a counterplan. Oh man, I don't know. Like even then, I can't think of a good sort of subset of billionaires to exclude and kind of pick out of this one. Huh.
I almost think you could go. I mean, you could go super aggressive. I sometimes kind of like the a little bit ludicrous plans, but like when you're talking about something that is this extreme of a round, anyways, like I think you can kind of go there. I think you could say like criminalize billionaire status, right?
Oh.
So something like the government confiscates every dime past 999,999,999. Like that is all now illegal to own that much money, and therefore it all straight goes to the government. Interesting.
Yeah. So eliminate billionaires. Yeah. I'm like, I'm almost tempted to go like a de-development approach, where you're like let it fall apart. You know what I mean? Like just like this is eventually going to lead to, torches and pitchforks, and they deserve it. So if we tax billionaires, it actually alleviates the pressure that they have been accumulating. And what needs to happen is a radical shift in wealth. And the only way that happens is if we surpass a threshold that we are approaching, and leads to de-development.
So would you say like the plan is now, or the counter plan is like a 1 cent tax or something like that? So it's supercharge the capabilities of billionaires.
Yeah, I would abolish
credit, maybe.
I would abolish income tax.
There you go.
Yeah,
crash the whole thing.
Yeah, okay. So I'm like that's I don't know. I mean, because at least it would be enjoyable. You know what I mean? At least the debate would be enjoyable that way. Because otherwise, it just feels really boring, disingenuous. I think I'd have to go like radically the opposite direction.
Yeah, I think the only other thing on the negative is you've got pretty decent solvency takeouts. Like, I think you can probably argue that billionaires already don't pay taxes. Like, they can be called a billionaire on their social media channels, but when the IRS comes knocking, oh no, most of our money's all wrapped up in foundations and charities and out of country accounts.
Yeah,
I'm not a billionaire, and so like the ability to weasel out of billionaire status is so prevalent that like this tax, like any new tax, wouldn't have any teeth. Would be like
I mean, I could do like the circumvention thing is probably a pretty good one. Like it's like, I mean, what if you tax billionaires based off of income, they're just not going to take income,
right? Yeah,
like
it doesn't mean anything. Like people, that's like a net worth type of thing, and that's like tied up in all kinds of assets and ownership, and so it's hard to do.
Yeah, so I might like ask about the details of how this tax would be enforced, and so I would do like definitely doing an e-spec and an enforcement, no enforcement sort of press on it, and then solvency circumvention. Yeah,
cool. All right, as the affirmative, here's where I strike next.
Okay,
unbalanced genetic modification in agriculture does more harm than good. I don't want to be on the affirmative side of this. That is, I think, just a really tough one. I think, like, at best, I can make some arguments about, like, the green revolution, maybe, which is now, like, very dated, like Norman Borlaug and, like, golden rice and golden soybeans and stuff. But the problem is, like, it seems to be the case that as soon as, like, genetic modification for agriculture, like, solves one problem, it creates another. And I think, like, there are just too many evils with it to, like, really justify the wins, because I think like the majority of the impacts that I get on the affirmative saying like that it is good is like, more mouths fed, right? Like longer, more shelf stable food. Basically, it's just more. Like the only thing that I've got is just more production. We're able to make more and feed more, but that really doesn't tend to get to the heart of the issue, that like is destroying, like not only like the mass population issues and things, or like overpopulation, but like the way that we're wrecking soil, and like the ways that government subsidies go towards this kind of thing, and the way that like seeds are and like is now intellectual property. So I think there's just too many like awful things in the negative. So I wouldn't want to be the affirmative on this one.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it does more harm than good. Yeah, you'd be able to. I don't know. You could talk about the intellectual property and how that. Yeah,
there's more harm than good. I read it backwards. Damn it.
Read it backwards.
All right. Yep, that happens. It's okay. It was actually low. No, that's not true. It was very high on my negative list. So never mind. See, problems.
Reversed. Yeah, it happens all the time, man.
Totally flipped that. I hate those harm than good. Okay, and honestly, harm than good is more common. But yeah, okay. So I totally read this backwards. Just kidding. I would love to be on the affirmative this one.
Yeah.
Okay.
But even then, more good than harm. So all you're talking about, like all the good than harm, like about just feeding millions of people. I think like I could talk about that. You know what I mean? Like I'm like, you know what? I think the intellectual property laws and how they screw up, agriculture is bad. I'm not even going to say that they're good, but we're talking like when you talk about like golden rice, it like it's like fed like a billion people. Like I mean, and so just malnutrition and things like that. I think that the negative actually has enough to make this a debate. Because I remember I ran a lot of GMO bad arguments when I was debating, and since then, like we should be seeing massive amounts of health problems from it, but usually what it is like maybe it's the soil depletion, but it seems like the biggest disadvantage to GMOs is more on a legal level than other things, because if you don't do genetic modification, you still have screwed up soil stuff in order to feed this many people, because like you're still using like nitrogen rich fertilizers in order to do like organic farming, and the runoff from that into places like the Gulf of Mexico produces giant algae blooms. You know what I mean? It's like, and so it's like I think we could go back and forth on the environmental aspects of farming with or without GMOs, but it would be more like legal versus malnutrition. It seems like it's like the law problems that you get from GMOs versus the nutrition benefits you get from it. Like I don't know. That's how I see the debate going down.
I think like law still becomes very much the environmental thing though. Like
it
is because you can only get seeds from one company that are this exact single strain,
right,
that you end up with completely depleted soil and like booms for a period of time in populations, and then the population grows, and now what, right? Like when you get like one type of corn is wrecked, like there goes the single source for a food for like an entire population, or one kind of soybean or one kind of rice gets a parasite or some kind of disease we can't solve or something. Like the lack of biodiversity is a direct result of genetic modification, patenting, and all the legal BS with it. So like I think that the three are all related, and I think that would just be an interesting like multi-pointed wrestling match of like, well, which one sequentially leads to the other. So it'd be an interesting debate, but yeah,
I think that is one of the debates that I think is pretty even-handed. You know what I mean? It's like one of those sort of like tried and true value debates that are going on for a long time. I do not think that GMOs are just great. But at the same time, I cannot overlook their benefits. Like, like there's just some ones that I'm kind of like, that's, I don't know. I can't ignore it.
Sure. Yeah. All right, cool. Your turn to strike.
Okay. Let's see here. Boom, 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 boom. Ooh, this one's actually tough. uh, uh, uh. See, one of them has a really clear counter plan. I'm like, okay, I could do that. Okay, I'm going to do. I think this one would be just too much. Like, I think the presumption is on favors the affirmative, and so that's why I don't like it. You know what I mean? It's like that you get to start off like because people generally like freedom of speech, and so allowing the affirmative to start off with presumption, get a 5-minute speech, get this running head start on me, and now I have to do a bunch of catch up. Like maybe I can figure something out in 30 minutes, but it feels like I'm already behind as soon as prep time starts. And so that's why, like, I'm like, okay, so, because I mean, what am I going to be advocating? Like, who's going to be controlling the speech? You know, if it's not, if it's not a free market of ideas, then like I always get concerned about like who are we advocating gets to modify it or regulate it or it's like, and I just like of all the disadvantages to misinformation, I can't think of good alternatives. You know what I mean? Like I don't trust people to regulate it because then all you have to do is find a way to get into those positions of power, and now you get to control the information, right? And so I don't know.
It is certainly like messy. It is not like a clean solution because you don't have any single one unbiased actor or group of actors that can like truly be just good authorities. That said, I think I would have to just default to those powers that be. Like, there's tons of Supreme Court cases over whether or not what is and is not free speech, and like what can and cannot be enforced by free speech. The FCC is supposed to regulate things like misinformation on news. So I think that's where I would probably just go harder into saying like the value of free speech is great. We currently don't, or I guess we currently overvalue it to the point that misinformation becomes it basically dilutes the value of it. So basically by nature of the presence of the megaphone that we're giving to misinformation, it dilutes the value of free speech. So I would say like regulated speech is more important. Right. So the FCC, for example, just historically has not been giving out any kind of fines or regulation against false news stories. So like in the era of 2016, 2020 beyond, when there's all kinds of like, oh, that's just fake news, that can be called out back and forth all the time. News sites can publish all kinds of nonsense, and there's never any teeth to regulations to hold them back. Argument being like, well, there's just too much noise in the space. That I feel like is just throwing up hands and ends up with people not trusting the actual truth. Like it basically waters down what real truth might be.
Yeah, you see what I'm getting at, though? That it's like now it's my burden to provide a plan. You know what I mean? It's like the affirmative gets to come up and say, status quo good, and they get 5 minutes to get a running head start on. It's like, it's like, listen, there are risks to it, but status quo is better than any plan that they propose. And now I have to like lay out this plan, and I don't get the last word. I get one opportunity in my rebuttal to answer any sort of disadvantage that you bring up in the 1AR.
Well, I mean, remember, though, it is a value round. So, like, I don't have to necessarily get into, like, here's practically how we execute this thing. I think you can, while it's trickier with value rounds, because, like, we want to get to this, like, technical, can they do it, can they not thing. I think this is a good one for a value round because it allows us to fall back on, like, does the dilution of the value of truth outweigh the cost of limitations on speech?
Yeah.
And I would say, like, yeah, like, our inability to tell fact from fiction is a bigger problem, arguably, like I'm going to argue it, is a bigger problem than our limitations on free speech. Like I would rather give up some free speech rights to know that the information circulating in the world or that I'm consuming or whatever is honest.
Yeah.
So, it's a good, I think it's a good one for a value because of like it bites, it takes a little bit out of that like plan thing. It is a mushier debate, certainly. Like it ends up just becoming like
if I were to write it, I would
Right.
just flip them. I'd say that the risks associated with misinformation outweigh the value of free speech, and I think that seems a little bit more in line with the traditional presumption burdens in a debate.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. All right, then my next strike and kind of defining the last one. I just don't love this topic.
Really? Okay. I thought I was going to be debating this one. All right.
No, I feel like it's a little bit done to death. At this point in time, there's probably more clever things being done in a lot of rounds, but the most recent really clever thing that I've seen done is arguments of basically it's like a pick counterplan just saying trade schools only, should make trade school tuition only. I like that a lot because I think there's lots of really good arguments about like why those jobs aren't going away, why we don't need to produce more liberal arts majors, why universities have been able to absolutely run wild like cartels, continually increasing their price, and no one says boo about it. So it's just like creating more debt, if not on students, on the government. So like I've got a lot of good beef against like four-year institutions that produce degrees and like what overinflated that value is. Whereas I think like trade school is really good. So I think like that's the best that I've seen on the negative side. But like I guess like less and less enthused by the idea that like, yep, everybody should go to post-secondary education, and it's so important that the government should pay for it, which actually means the taxpayers.
Mm-hmm.
So like I think I'm just not sold on the idea enough.
Yeah, it makes for really easy picks. You know what I mean? It's like, no, we should just community colleges, or
Sure.
or no, we should just lower tuition, or like some really. Like you have a whole slew of counterplan ground on this one. And that's why I'm like, I left it on there. I'm like, yeah, I could probably find a pretty good counterplan to do for this one. Yeah.
Or we could, take out our beefs on textbooks. Like now, textbooks free.
Yeah. So, and yeah, I don't know. You're right. It's been talked about a lot, especially over the last 4 years with all the attempts to, forgive debt and things like that.
I think it's a good topic for like beginning argumentation debate classes, like because everyone's probably got a little bit of weight on it, ability to see both sides of it. Like there's a lot that can be done. And then it's useful for starting to teach some of those procedural arguments like, a pick, or like, ways that you could be questionably topical, or when you should call a topicality. Like I think it's a useful topic for teaching, but I just don't like it for rounds anymore. I feel like it's a little done to death, and it just comes to like, who's the most clever or who has the most interesting view on it because they've debated it 10,000 times.
Yeah. All right.
So that means our final topic.
All right. Now this one is a little dangerous for the negative. I understand that, right? Because one way you could say, all I have to do is show that it helps me just a little bit. All right. Yeah. But I would push back really hard on this one, saying that the affirmative needs to show that it helps more than it hurts. That on balance, U.S. foreign aid, helps the United States. And I'm like, listen, the benefit isn't felt within the boundaries of the United States mostly. Any benefit that we offer, it should be felt outwards. But I think what I would also be doing is trying to maybe make a little critical argument on this one, where doing foreign aid for selfish reasons is unethical.
Okay.
Yeah.
Explain.
So basically voting for this is voting for an America First policy. Basically, that you are saying is like, oh, we should only do things that help the United States, and foreign aid helps the United States. I'm like, I don't care. We shouldn't even consider whether or not it helps you. Even if it does help the United States, that should not even be a factor. It should not even be a consideration on it. It is a responsibility of wealthy nations to help those that aren't as wealthy, that need help. And so, so I would say that this is a non-issue, and that we shouldn't do it for these reasons. And therefore reject this as any sort of a mantra or a banner that we're going for in order to convince people on why to do foreign aid.
Okay. I think like, so just like the deontological, like it is right to do it because it is right to do it. Like,
yeah. That's not bad. That's the more of a classic sort of way of going about it. Like, like voting for this is voting for like a consequentialist approach. And it's like, no, we should be, focusing on why we do that, not looking for ways to, like when really, really wealthy people are like, oh, I only give to charity in order for the tax write-off. I'm like, well, that's unethical.
Interesting. Okay. So I think I want to just want to just start going like the classical like libertarian view of like there is no responsibility of anyone to another. It starts to get hairy really quickly. Was it Leibniz, the like counterpart to Rawls, and like his argument of like, okay, you don't need like the forced like charitable action or something like that.
Right.
Everyone still acts self-interestedly. So there's like good arguments that like, or it would be a little hard pressed to find in a short period, but I'd be using my prep time, finding examples from like economic perspectives of why altruism is basically defunct or why it isn't real. So the idea being like people aren't going to get behind something that doesn't have anything in it for them. So what, the United States is really wealthy, we have our own problems. Narrative wins out every damn time, right? Like every time that there's something like, well, we ought to help, the question always ends up coming back to like, well, how does that help us or hurt us? And I'm not going to do something to help someone else if we aren't, solving our problem or whatever. Right. So I think I can start to maybe like set aside for a moment, like, all right, the value here is like, sure, we should still act self-interestedly because all actions are self-interested, and no one really does things fully altruistically. And thus U.S. foreign aid is good because it gives us the ability to sanction other countries. Like we give so that we can take away. And like, does that make us evil? I don't know. Ask the like millions of people that are fed because of foreign aid or that are like safe because of foreign aid, whatever. Like or like look at the examples of wars that haven't happened because of soft power. Like foreign aid is the most powerful soft power that we've got. And some argue that like the corn that the U.S. grows and sells or gives is more powerful than the military because we don't have to use the military all the time, but we can increase or decrease the amount of aid that we give and make things happen without the need of hard power. So I think I'd probably just turn it into like, soft power is more important. Like Jared thinks that everyone should do things in such a way, and shoulds lead to bullets. Like shoulds just end up letting actual conflict take over when like, self-interested smaller actions minimize the suffering or something. And I think it's right. Start to tell that.
Yeah. Well, one of the issues I have with this is I don't think this is a fact resolution. This resolution is not a question of fact. It is still a question of value.
Okay.
It's about the intrinsic value of foreign aid. And so like, and I'm saying that I understand like it kind of is phrased as if it were a question of value, but the central question is like, is foreign aid good or bad? You know what I mean? And so I'm like, like that's not really like in my, like the way I have been looking at questions of fact is they are either categorical, right? Like what is or is not. It is conjecture, so like predicting the future of something, or it is. I mean, you could do correlation.
Circumstantial, like circumstantial. So like
what was the categorical, causal, or
comparative, like a one in conflict.
No. That's still a value. That's still a value one. So like conjecture or categorical are usually the sort of main ways in which I think that things are questions of fact. So like one of my favorite ones is like Barbie is a feminist icon. You might think, feminism is good or bad, and that doesn't matter. It's like whether or not Barbie fits that category is the only sort of question or the central question in that one. There's other debates that you could have that are related to that, but the central question, or like who's going to win the next World Series, that like you could vote for your own favorite baseball team, but that's that's not the good faith sort of central question of those things. So like those tend to be the questions of fact that I consider to be real fact debates. This one is still kind of Yeah.
And I think for all of that dodging is why I want to be on the affirmative.
Yeah.
Like, I think the amount of like difficulty and wordsmithing that it takes to really craft the narrative, like this isn't a fact round and here's how we should be thinking about this, and also altruism, is like, yeah, I'd rather just be on the affirmative.
Oh, I wouldn't even get into it. This was a complete aside, to try to like push my philosophy on like the difference between questions of fact and value. Yeah. So yeah. The comparative is value. So this versus that is value, or intrinsic. This is an example of an intrinsic value versus this versus that. The other two value round topics, those were comparative values.
Okay.
Questions of comparative value.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
So really good topics. Thank you again to the folks over at Grossmont. This is a good tournament. Griffin's always a fun one. And thank you for the value, fact, policy topics. IPDA.
Yeah. Yes. The value in policy. Yes. All right. We'll be back in the future talking about some deep dives, whatever we figure out when it comes up. All right. See y'all later.
See ya.